Welcome to the Korea Pro podcast. I'm your host, Jeongmin Kim, the editorial director of Korea Pro.
And I'm John Lee, the editor of Korea Pro.
Join us for a weekly 15-minute conversation as we dive into the most pressing stories shaping South Korea and dissect the most complicated ones for you.
From politics to culture, technology to society, we've got you covered. So stay ahead of the curve and never be sidelined again.
So get ready for a fresh perspective on South Korea's news. This is the Korea Pro podcast. Welcome back, listeners. This is Korea Pro Podcast. I'm Jeongmin and John with me here today as usual, and Joon Ha as well. Let's start with the biggest news this week, Trump's speech. It was an hour and 40 minutes or so, right?
Yep.
And he touched on many different issues, and he mentioned South Korea directly, and also MOFA did like a very sassy sort of press release, very rare, sort of pushing back against Trump's remarks. Can you walk us through it, John?
Well, let's just focus on what he said about South Korea.
Yeah.
Regarding South Korea, Donald Trump specifically mentioned that South Korea charges 4 times more tariffs on American goods than America charges South Korea. But what his statement naturally failed to mention was that South Korea and the U.S. have a free trade agreement.
He might have forgotten about that.
And both countries have most favored nation status for each other.
Right.
And so as soon as Donald Trump made that speech, the finance ministry came up with a very firm response. It was a very factual response, saying that because of all the things that I just mentioned, the actual tariff rate is 0.79%. And it's not 4 times more than what Donald Trump was saying that it was. But, you know, the finance ministry, despite its tersely worded but factual statements, is not going to work in Donald Trump because Donald Trump doesn't operate on facts. He operates on feelings. And
So what's the feeling that Donald Trump was trying to express?
The feeling was that he was saying that he doesn't count tariffs just the way that normal economists calculate tariffs. He also includes things like the value-added tax, non-tariff barriers, subsidies that the countries give to their own industries. And with all of that, he considers all of that as a tariff. And so because facts don't work with Donald Trump, we are living in a post-fact, post-truth world here in the United States. This is what we're going to have to end up dealing with. And we also have to mention that Donald Trump didn't just talk about trade. He also mentioned in that same sentence, when he mentioned that South Korea supposedly imposes 4 times more tariffs than the U.S. does, he said that despite everything that we do for them.
Didn't he mention defense directly?
Exactly. And so there's a lot of fear and speculation going on within the halls of power here in Korea that Donald Trump is very likely, 110% guaranteed, that he is going to tie defense and trade together.
So it was one of the first signs, like direct signs that we are seeing that he is counting in defense and security cooperation, security guarantees sort of things into the equation when he thinks about, you know, the business deal, like relations between not just foes but friends. But also you said let's focus on South Korea mentions in the speech, but of course there is like larger geopolitical context that we are seeing here right now. There are multiple countries that appear to have chosen their way of responding to Trump. In Korean way of saying it, it's 강대강. When Trump comes out strong, you respond strongly as well, rather than making concessions or being soft. And what are some of the recent examples?
Well, what we just saw was with Canada. Trump, after the first month delay of tariffs on Canada and Mexico, said that he was going to allow another month delay on those tariffs, but on specific goods like automobiles coming in from Canada. But what the Canadian government responded with was saying that they are still going to impose their 25% tariffs on $155 billion worth of American imports until Washington decides to withdraw all of its tariffs on Canada.
How much would that hurt?
Well, the $155 billion tariffs, it would hurt a little bit, but we also have to remember that there's also Montreal in Canada, which also exports energy, electricity to a bunch of the northern states in the U.S. Now, I'm not sure how credible this is, but Montreal said that they were going to impose tariffs on the energy exports as well. And this would raise energy prices for especially those northern states. Now, South Korea doesn't have those kinds of cards. South Korea doesn't export energy to the U.S. South Korea exports a lot of goods that Trump considers as competitive products compared to American companies. And that's why South Korea, despite the Kangdaegang response that you just mentioned, really just gave a very factual statement.
Right. But I should also mention that in South Korean cultural way of expecting what usually foreign ministry press releases sort of look like, they kind of tried. I could see that they tried to put in some sass into the headline saying 사실은 이렇습니다. Actually was their tone, trying to push back rather than saying something generic and nice about that.
At the expense of sounding like Yoon Hong. Yes, there is a thing called Gucci. Right. Yeah, as much as I hate sounding like her, it's true. When it comes to not just society, but government press releases, we try to soften our language a little bit. But this was a very factual, strongly worded statement.
In the Korean sense, it was very strong.
Exactly.
Let's move on to the next topic. It's something that happened just this morning. One of those cases where we wake up and not expecting to see this type of news. It started off with a breaking news saying there were shells that fell on civilian houses in Pocheon near the inter-Korean border. And initially, my immediate response was like whose shell was it? Was it North Korean? Was it South Korean? Was it U.S.? And apparently there was a drill going on near border, and something happened there. Joon Ha, can you fill us in?
Yeah, so the incident did happen at 10:04 a.m. This morning, where a ROK Air Force fighter jet, which was participating within the U.S. ROK drills that were happening in the Pocheon area. It was
Is
live.
this Freedom Shield?
It's related to it.
It's connected to it, yes. And they were just live fire drills between the Army and the Air Force, a combined set of drills with some U.S. drone forces as well. And what the ROK Air Force confirmed this morning was that 8 Mk-82 bombs that were carried by a KF-16 fighter jet, that's a ROK Air Force fighter jet, it abnormally released, and that is a direct quote from their press statement, falling outside of the designated firing range that was supposed to be designated within the Pocheon drill site during the joint exercise near the inter-Korean border.
But what does that mean, abnormally released? Was it a mechanical issue? Was it a human error?
Well, that's not confirmed yet. It's not confirmed whether it was a human error or a mechanical issue. But either way, it's an incredible mishap. Yep. So it's been a decade since we've seen civilian injuries coming up from joint or just single unilateral drills. And the last major incident we saw was the botched Jeongmin missile drill that happened in 2022. But
that fired back.
Yeah, that fired back into South Korean territory.
Lodgings or something.
Yeah,
but barracks.
Barracks, yeah.
But no one was injured. But just today, 4 people sustained serious injuries and 3 suffered minor wounds in the incident.
These are all civilians?
All civilians, yes. So 7 injuries in total. The explosions that were caused by the 8 Mk-82 bombs that were released in the Nogongni neighborhood, it damaged a church, 2 civilian residences, and a 1-ton cargo vehicle, according to the fire authorities that I spoke to this morning. And they did issue a level 1 emergency alert at 10:18 a.m. Of course, it's been lifted now as of 10:47. But on-site response efforts are still ongoing.
There were evacuation warnings for the residents nearby because of there were emergency evacuation orders because of the bombs that did not go off. Am I correct?
Yeah, so as of now, authorities have confirmed that the civilians that were living on the site, they have all been evacuated to different areas due to any further injuries that could take place due to those unfired bombs. But Seoul's defense ministry, the response measures coming 2.5 hours or 2 hours and 40 minutes after the actual incident caused a lot of confusion within ROK media, going first to the fire authorities instead of the defense ministry.
Right, and there will be more investigations and we will hear more about it. I have a lot of questions in my mind, but I don't think we should be speculating too much as of now. So let's keep an eye on this and touch back on this issue next week. Let's move back to econ and trade related issues. It's a start of the month, so apparently there were multiple releases of the economic indicators this morning. John?
The finance ministry released its consumer price index, and for the month of February, the consumer price index went up to 2.0%, which was a slight downward trend compared to January. January was 2.2. This time it's 2.0. Now, the way that we have to think of these three different categories. The first one is a consumer price index, which is 2.0%, as I just mentioned. And the second one is the core inflation rate, which is 1.8%. Now, the difference between these two is that the core inflation rate removes what they call volatile prices, such as, energy, food. These prices are very volatile and they can change. And so in order to get a more stable sort of number, they remove that and it becomes 1.8%. And so if you look at only those two numbers, it looks like inflation is somewhat easing compared to January. But we need to look at the third category, which is the life cost index. This life cost index went up by 2.6% compared to a year ago. Now, what the life cost index calculates is the price of everything that you and I buy every day. Food, clothes, movie tickets, things like that. And when you put that all into a basket, all of that, which people actually spend their money on a daily basis, went up by 2.6%. So if you look at those two earlier numbers, the consumer price index and the core inflation rate, and you look at the life cost index, you can see a complete disconnect between what people are spending in their everyday lives compared to these official data sets. And so people are now spending more money than they had to. Now, there were GDP numbers that came up, the GNI numbers, which showed that South Korea numbers were improving. But because of this inflation rate that's going up, this is going to have political ramifications. We've mentioned in the past how the ruling and the opposition parties talk about supplementary budgets. This is likely going to lead to a lot of that because when people's daily expenditures are going up by 2.6% year on year, that just goes to show you that people are now worried about spending, debt, and that's going to have a huge impact on domestic consumption.
And it will have spiral impact on other sectors as well.
Exactly.
And lastly, just this morning, the National Barometer Survey, NBS, released the weekly poll. It seems like the Democratic Party it regained the lead when it comes to party popularity, just very slightly, but still it regained the lead after just weeks of PPP sort of leading in the NBS polls. And it does look like anti-impeachment sentiment is slightly going down, but it's still under margin. So largely it's similar to previous weeks, but we're not seeing anything like a massive spike in PPP support or Yoon support, it seems. And it looks like Han Dong-hoon, the former PPP leader, he gained a bit of support after his book release. It does look like he is now sort of similar to the support level that Hong Joon-pyo is getting, Daegu mayor. And also Kim Mun-soo, the labor minister, and the Seoul mayor Oh Se-hoon are now kind of competing within margin. Joon Ha wrote a very extensive piece about Han Dong-hoon's book, so if you want to read more about it, visit koreapro.org.
Looking to stay informed about South Korea's fast-evolving political, business and cultural landscape? Join us on Korea Pro, the go-to resource for in-depth analysis expertly curated by top-tier professionals. And now you can pick the membership level that best suits your needs, thanks to our new subscription packages. Starting at just $199 annually, you can access daily analysis and our weekly podcast. Or try our premium membership package, which offers additional perks such as executive briefings, monthly reports and forecasts, networking receptions and event opportunities, as well as much, much more. To find the best fit for you, just head to signup.koreapro.org and become a member today.
Week ahead, China's 2 sessions are going on, and it will wrap up next week, March 11th, and we will probably see a lot of economic indicators, their version, Chinese version of the indicators by next week. Some were already published this week, like the defense spending and whatnot, but we're keeping a close eye on it. There will be some impact on South Korean economic directions as well. But the biggest news next week, potentially next week, as early as next week, I think, would be impeachment ruling. Joon Ha, is there any latest when it comes to like other court cases that are going on with Han Duck-soo and the Justice appointment and whatnot?
The Han Dok-soo and the justice appointment, they're still going on. There's no release schedule or that's anything that's coming up within the next week. The main thing that will be on the Constitutional Court's mind will be the incumbent president's impeachment.
Right. I do see that the Constitutional Court emptied their schedule entirely up until March 17th. So it does look like, although there are like a lot of reports mentioning specific dates, it's really not confirmed yet. So let's just keep an eye on it. But when that happens, it will be a sort of moment of truth, sort of moment on where we will be headed towards in the next 2 years or 5 years.
And just speaking of China, as what's going on there, the Chinese Foreign Ministry released a very terse statement after Trump's tariff threats.
That was spicy.
The last sentence that they said was that whether it's a tariff war or a trade war or any other kind of war, China is willing to fight to the end.
And in any other type of war, that part was very, very important.
Exactly. And with all of these 2 sessions going on, we can see the direction that China is taking. And as the war of words, at least the war of words that is so far the war of words between the U.S. and China intensify, South Korea is going to be caught right in the middle. And all of this information that we're going to be observing will be sent to your email inboxes by the Week Ahead newsletter by Monday, 2 p.m. So if you'd like to know more, please subscribe. Have a good weekend, everyone.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in.
If you want to know more, sign up for our daily executive briefings. We brief you on all you need to know from the past 24 hours and why they matter every morning in your inboxes.
Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for your weekly dose of insight. And until next time, I'm Jeongmin Kim.
And I'm John Lei. Stay connected, stay informed, and we'll see you next time on the Korea Pro Podcast.